Hi, welcome to part 17 of my Halo map creation tutorial series. In this tutorial we're going to be focusing on debugging any errors from our mesh, and then we're going to be exporting a test file which we're going to compile and hopefully troubleshoot any errors that we have. And once we've done so, I think we'll move back into 3ds Max and continue unwrapping our level correctly and adding textures. So before we get started, I'm just going to save this as file number 17. Okay. First of all, whenever you're debugging any errors, you want to get more of the obvious kind of scenarios out of the way. So one of the most common type of things that people usually forget is to weld all your vertices. So I'm going to enter vertex mode, hit Ctrl A, right click, and weld all of my verts to a threshold of 0.1. Alright, now the next thing we want to do is enter border mode and hit Ctrl A. I've mentioned this before, but the border mode tool is really useful for locating open edges, which are one of the most hazardous sort of errors you could have in your scene. So I have an open edge here, and what I've done to locate it is hit Ctrl A and then hit Z, which will zoom in on the error. And I think the problem here is we have a back face which we just forgot to delete, which is fine. I'm going to leave that in there for now because I'm going to show you another way that you can find errors inside of your level. So going back into edit poly mode, I'm going to open up the modifier list and bring up a modifier called STL check. Okay, and under errors, you can check for specific errors, but I think it's usually far more wise to have everything checked. Under selections, I have select faces, and I don't usually use change material ID since most of the errors are too obscure to notice visually with this option, so I'm going to leave that unchecked, and then I'm going to hit check. Alright, it's found 2 errors. I'm going to hit Z, and it's not going to locate those errors for me with this modifier engaged. So what I'll do is right click, convert this down to edit poly, and since we had the select faces option checked, I'm going to enter polygon mode or face mode. Then I'm going to hit Z, and it should have those faces selected from the STL check modifier, which it has done. So I'm going to delete that face, and looks like I also have a few faces with the wrong material ID here. That's not a problem, to be honest, but probably a good idea to get it out of the way now rather than later. So change it over to a material ID of 2. Wonderful. Okay, and I'm satisfied with my level so far. This doesn't mean that our mesh is completely error-free. If you have any experience with exporting levels and stuff like that, you'll probably be aware that the compilation process, converting this file from a 3D file into a game file, will usually spit out more errors than you thought you had. So yeah. Okay, so lastly I'm going to convert this down to an edit mesh. Rule number 1 of exporting: whenever you're going to export anything into Halo, make sure it's in an edit mesh mode and not an edit poly mode. And the reason for that is because these two modifiers handle edges and faces differently. The edit poly modifier, for example, if I select this face here, whoops, there we go, it's telling me that this is one face and that there are no edges situated between the 4 poles that we have here. Whereas in edit mesh mode, this actually calculates all of the triangles and edges between poles and stuff like that. So if I do the same thing there, you'll notice that we have an invisible edge here. And that's really why, even if I have an n-gon in my mesh here, for example, if I go to edit poly mode, backspace that edge out, go back to edit mesh mode, I could still get away with this because the edit mesh modifier is covering up for me by triangulating that n-gon for me. So this is why it's always useful to use the edit mesh modifier. Right. Lastly, I'm going to reset the XForm and then convert this down to another edit mesh, and that's that. So next thing we need to do is create a reference frame which we will link our mesh to. So over in the right hand side here, I'm going to bring up the standard primitives option under the create tab, and I'm going to draw out a box. Could be any size, any length, but I prefer it to be uniform. So I'm going to make it 1,000 long, 1,000 wide, and 1,000 tall. I'm also going to change the color to black. This is just, again, preferences. What you do have to do though, and this is unavoidable, is rename this to frame. Okay, now the next thing we need to do is link our mesh to our frame object. The way I'm going to do that is select my mesh first of all, hit select and link, click and drag from my mesh onto the box here, let go of my mouse button, and then I'm going to hit Q to disengage the link tool so I don't accidentally link anything which I didn't mean to. And to check that this is linked correctly, what you can do is if you move the box around, you'll notice that the mesh will follow the box wherever you move the frame. Another way you can check that worked correctly is opening up the select by scene dialog. So you can hit H on your keyboard or hit this icon, and you want to make sure that under display you have display children checked, and under the mesh hierarchy here you should have something that looks like this. You should have the frame object acting as a parent and the level object acting as a child. Okay, and the model reference we can leave alone. We don't have to delete that out of our scene because we have a frame here which is going to tell our exporter that anything attached to the frame is what we want to export, and anything that isn't attached is to be left alone. Okay, so let's go to the MaxScript toggle here, and I'm going to select Run Script, and the exporter I'm going to be using is the JMS Exporter 104E. I have another exporter here called Exporter version 1.01. This is sort of an older version of what I'm going to be using today, and it takes a little bit longer to boot up, which is why I'm not going to be using it. But if you have any problems with this exporter, then go ahead and use that one. I also have the option here to use a different exporter which exports significantly faster than those MaxScript derivatives, but I'm not going to be using this because this exporter is only supported from 3ds Max 2011 up to 3ds Max 2015. So if you're using 3ds Max 2010, for example, or 3ds Max 2016, you're pretty much screwed. So that's why I'm not going to be using this option as much as I'd like to. Right, so let's select our, save our scene first of all. I'm going to go to MaxScript, Run Script, run the JMS Exporter 104E, export my JMS data. I'm going to save it to my desktop as kickass_canyon, and it's very important that you add a .jms file extension, and you want to hit save and wait for your file to export. Okay, so once it's done, you can go ahead and close this dialog. By the way, try and be patient with it. It does take a little bit of time. Obviously, the more denser your mesh, the longer it's going to take. One more thing I forgot to mention is that the script which I'm using, you'll notice is situated in a particular directory, which is my 3ds Max 2014 scripts folder. You do not have to have Max Script set up in a particular folder for it to work. You can run this off your desktop or any other folder. So if you're particularly messy and not really organized, you don't really have to worry about putting the script in a specific folder for it to work. Okay, so let's go ahead and compile our file. Here it is. I'm going to go ahead and cut it from my desktop and paste it into my Halo Custom Edition level directory which we set up. So over in data, let's head into levels, test, kick-ass underscore canyon, and I'm going to create a new folder here called models, and in that folder I'm going to paste the file. Okay, so now it's time to run tool and compile this model from a JMS file into a structure file. So I'm going to head back into my Halo root directory and open up tool. You'll notice that I have a few extra programs here. Don't worry about that. I'm just using default stuff. So just ignore anything that you don't have. You should have tools set up. So I'm going to open that up right now. And just to get rid of all this junk above, I'm going to hit CLS. And then I'm going to type in, first of all, to compile our images here, tool space bitmaps space levels backslash test backslash kick-ass underscore canyon backslash bitmaps. Now, before we continue, let me explain what I just typed in here. First of all, tool is pretty much to initiate the tool application. Since the command prompt here isn't the application itself, this is just used to run the application. Bitmaps tells tool that we want to compile bitmaps, and then levels backslash test backslash kick-ass canyon blah blah blah. That is the folder directory. Now, if you're new to using tool and you're having trouble with figuring out where your directory is, what I suggest you do is go ahead and then just backspace that syntax out. Let's go to bitmaps and hit space once again. One thing I used to do as a beginner is go ahead and just click on the address and grab the address from levels and just copy that. Go back into tool here, right click and paste that in, and then I don't have to worry about typing all that stuff in. And if you're wondering why we don't have to type in data, Halo Custom Edition data blah blah blah, that's because tool already assumes that you're in the data folder, which is why it's so important that you set your folders up in the way that I've shown you. Okay, so I'm going to hit enter with this to compile. Right, and it did that pretty quickly. And once again, the rate at which this converts files is pretty much dependent on the size and quality of the file. We're using pretty small textures here, so it really isn't going to take any more than a second. In any case, I'm going to hit CLS again to get rid of the stuff above, and now I'm going to type in tool space structure space let's go ahead and grab the directory of the level folder, not the models folder. So copy that from levels, paste that in, whoops. Make sure that we have a space in between structure and levels. And now, after Kick-Ass Canyon, I'm going to hit space and add the name of the file which I want to export, which is Kick-Ass Canyon, same as the folder name. Right, and I'm going to hit enter, wait for this to compile. By the way, try and ignore this message which I have here. This is because I'm using not a slightly different version of Tool, but I added something into my tag set which changes the messages which Tool spits out a little bit, but you do not need to worry about it at all. Alright, going back to what we have here, we have a warning: found nearly coplanar faces, red and green. That isn't anything to worry about. Typically, coplanar faces are no more than a hindrance rather than anything. They don't really affect gameplay or performance so far as I've tested. So just really ignore that error. Okay, so our BSP compiled correctly, and if you are a beginner to this whole game modding type of thing, and you're using the HUK in particular, this is not going to be the case for you. I've exported hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of levels before, so I really know what I'm doing, whereas you will not, so more than likely you're going to have errors here. Which puts me at a disadvantage first of all. What I'm going to do first is hit CLS, and I'm going to go ahead and delete something from my tag set because I was expecting a particular error here and it hasn't showed up for some reason. And it's probably because I have, some previous files left over. So I'm going to bring up that command again by hitting the up arrow key. I'm going to hit enter. Okay, and this is what I was expecting. Now, if you are met by the same thing which I have, the same message which I have here, what basically is happening here is that we've compiled a mesh with images or textures here which do not have shaders pre-set up for them. So what Tool is saying here is you need to set up a shader for them now. Which kind of shader do you want set up? If you're using images on a level, then you want to use a shader environment. So just hit 1 on your keyboard, hit 1 again, and I'm going to hit CLS just to get rid of all that stuff. Okay, now it hasn't compiled our level because of the shader problem. So what we're going to do is set up our shaders first of all very quickly. I'm going to enter my Halo Custom Mission root directory, go into tags, and oops, it's not there, probably because it's in my virtual store folder. Okay, so if you go into our tags folder, you should have 2 files corresponding to the ones which we told Tool to create just a moment ago. Grab those, cut them, go into levels, inside your tags folder, test, Kick-Ass _ Canyon, create a new folder here, call it shaders. And in that folder you want to paste those 2 files. Now, we haven't set these up yet, so going back into our Halo root directory, we want to open up an application called Gorilla. This will allow us to specifically edit those game files, also known as tags. So let's go to levels, test, Kick-Ass _ Canyon, shaders, open up those 2 files. Now, a shader, in case you're unaware, basically allows you to tweak certain visual properties of a material or texture. So you can see that we have stuff for physics, what type of material the texture is, and then you have stuff like lens flares, diffuse properties, detail maps, reflection, illumination, speculant, stuff like that. So we just want to check simple parameterization since these are test materials. And then the base map, we just want to link the texture to the shader. So this shader which we're editing is checker map B, and it's brought us to our shaders folder. So let's go up one folder, go to our bitmaps, and choose checker map _ B. I'm going to X out of this, and it's going to ask you to save, which you want to do. And it's the same thing for this shader as well. So checker map _ whoops, that's the wrong file. Bitmaps, there we go, checker map A. Okay, and once you've set those shaders up, go ahead and close Gorilla. Bring up Tool again, hit the up arrow key, and wait for that to compile. Okay, so I've compiled this nearly 3 times now, and I'm happy with the way that it has been converted. And what I'm going to do here is go ahead and set this up quickly so we can test it in game. Now, if you have any errors or anything that stops the conversion process, if you have messages like open edges, blah blah blah, you need to fix this. In the next tutorial, so part number 18, I'm going to cover stuff like that. So just skip through that tutorial if you are having any problems. For now, I'm going to open up Gorilla once again. Go File, Open, enter my tag set, Levels, Test, Kick-Ass Canyon. There should be 2 new files created. So the scenario and the structure BSP. You want to open up the scenario file first of all. Now, whenever you're creating a level or a map, your scenario file must have a sky situated to it. So I'm going to hit add. I'm going to add a sky really quickly. Let's go into our tag set. Skies are, by the way, found under the sky folder, so it's pretty much self-explanatory. And I'm going to choose clear afternoon.sky. I'm creating a multiplayer map, not a solo map. Local north, not really relevant, I'll explain that later on. Apart from that, I'm going to excuse me, leave everything default. Okay, next thing I need to do is run radiosity or lighting for our map. If we open it at the moment using Sapien, which is our map populator, the map is going to be completely black. So let's find the scenario file for that. There it is. Okay, if we expand the game view really quickly, your map will either be black or you won't be able to locate it at all, no matter what you do. So that's because there is no sky, or not sky, sorry, that's an incorrect term, because there is no lighting rendered for the level. So to render your lighting, what you need to do is, first of all, type in tool space light maps space levels /test /kickass _canyon. Once again, the same directory that we entered before, /kickass _canyon, and then space kickass principal canyon, and then the lighting threshold, which you want this to stop at. I'm going to use a quick pass, so that's going to be 0 space 0.9. We'll hit enter, wait for that to do its thing. Shouldn't take too long. Once again, ignore any messages that you have here, the meter definition, blah blah blah, that's not relevant at all. Alright, that was done pretty quickly. So it's rendered our light maps. So if we open up Sapien once again, open up the scenario, expand the game view, you should now see that we have our level. And it actually looks pretty cool, pretty sort of funky so far. The blue and red textures, they aren't as horrible as I thought they were going to be. Obviously, I'm not going to leave them as they are. I am going to change them, but it doesn't look too bad. Okay, so controls, if I haven't explained them already, to sort of pan the camera around, you use the middle mouse wheel on your mouse and then just move the mouse around. To move forward, hold your mouse wheel down and hit W. To move to the left, again, hold your mouse wheel down and hit A. Move to the right, hit D. To move backwards, hit S. To go up, hit R. To go down, hit F. And if you want to change the camera speed here, just hit Shift with your middle mouse wheel pressed firmly down, and you can toggle through the speeds from 1 all the way to 60. Okay, so I'm really just going to do a quick check here of our surfaces, make sure everything all looks good. I'm really looking for any smoothing group artifacts, stuff like that. I'm not sure if that's a smoothing group problem there, or if it's just a shadow problem. That looks to me like a shadow. Or it could just be a texture scene. Let's go inside of here. So it's pretty dark in here, so I need to keep a mental note that it's probably wise to add some lighting textures into our... It's probably a good idea to incorporate them into those sort of bases, because it is dark there. Apart from that, I'm happy with this. What I'm going to quickly do is sort of get rid of the output tool window, drag my properties palette down here, my hierarchy view up here, expand the game view once again, and everything's squished and squashed, that's fine. I'm quickly just going to lay down a few player starting points for our map. So I'm going to put 3 there, and by the way, I've situated them by hitting the right mouse button, and I'll just leave them as they are. I'll also add a vehicle, so I'm going to go to Objects, Units, Vehicles. I'm going to edit under Edit Types. I'm going to hit Add, and you want to navigate to your Vehicles directory, which is under Tags once again, Vehicles. I'm going to add a Warthog. Once you're done, hit Done. Then hit OK. Once again, right click to situate an object onto your map. And at the moment a marker is just going to show up, which I've just lost. Oh, there it is. And what you want to do here under type is change it from none to Warthog, and then your vehicle should appear. You want to make sure that under multiplier spawn flags you have all of these checked. And that actually reminds me, under playing starting points, you want to select all of your block markers and change the type to all games. And I'm just going to leave everything as it is. So you'll only be able to spawn in red team and not blue team, which is fine because we're just testing at the moment. So once you're done, hit File, Save Scenario, exit out of Sapien, And the command to compile our scenario into a map file is tool space build dash cache dash file space levels /test /kick_ass_canyon /kick_ass_canyon, and then just hit enter. Oops, got that wrong. There we go. And once it's compiled, you can go ahead and test it in game. So I'm going to bring up another recorder here and show you what it looks like really quickly in game, and I'll show you, the whole process of testing a level. Alright, here I am in game, so I'm going to enter multiplayer, open up a LAN game, select my map, and I'm going to set a Slayer mode to be run, and I'm going to hit start game.
Slayer.
Awesome. Okay, here is our map. First impressions, it's pretty big. I've already spotted a couple of errors. There seems to be not a rendering error, but something going on with the top of our cliffs there, where the structure meets the skybox. So either a vert is too high, or I know what's going on there. It needs fixing, so that's one of the things on my to-do list. Okay. So I didn't anticipate this sort of anomaly occurring. While it's not strictly an anomaly, it's more of a user error or a creator error. It seems we have a lot of these weird triangles. Now, this can either be due to your triangulation being completely wrong, or you haven't added enough detail. I think in our case, we've been a little bit overzealous with the optimization of our structure. It's just a little bit too low, so I think we're going to have to go back in 3ds Max in part 19 and go ahead and either relax some of our geometry to make it look a little bit more rounded and curved, or if failing that, we're just going to have to add more geometry. And that's where the compromise meets detail count and f frames per second. The more detail you have, the less frames per second you get. The more frames per second you have, the less detail you get, generally, is the rule. But, professional map makers, they have their own rules and codes of conduct. They have their own ways and workflows of getting around this. Yeah, anyway, moving back to the testing portion. Oh, by the way, that's on my to-do list, so all of this sort of low, junky, jagged geometry, and that's going to need fixing. Back into the testing portion of what we're doing here. Go ahead and if your vehicles haven't loaded up correctly, it's probably because we did something wrong in Sapien, but I'm going to use a cheat command since I have Halo loaded up in developer mode. So I'm going to type in cheat spawn warthog. Alright, here's our warthog. And what I suggest you is you drive around your map, bump into every wall you can, every surface which you can possibly interact with. Crash, bump, drive into it, drive over it, drive around it. You want to test, or you want to try and test every single surface, especially if you compiled your map with errors. So those would include degenerate triangles, stuff like that. Errors which you know that need fixing, but the structure has somehow managed to compile correctly anyway. Even if you have a flawless BSP, sometimes you're going to encounter these errors, and the errors which I speak of generally consist of, clipping or unconditional clipping, and then sometimes you'll find that you fall through the BSP completely, or you'll hit a surface, fall through it, and an exception will occur and the game will close. These are all common traits of a map which has structural collision errors. So what I do or what I suggest you do, is try and make a mental note of where where the error occurred, and go ahead and troubleshoot, why the error occurred, because it sometimes isn't going to be just because you have bad collision. It can have something to do with the tags that you're using, but since we're using stock vanilla tags, that's not going to be a problem if you do encounter an error. If you can rule all of that out, then you're going to have to go back into 3ds Max and rebuild sort of that portion, or possibly get rid of any errors which are attached to that portion. And I'll be showing you those techniques in part 18 of my tutorial series. You also want to make sure that every surface which you intend to be usable is usable, both in player form, walking around, and in vehicle form, driving around. There's no use having a surface which you can drive up, but not walk up, unless you intended for that to happen. I think, is this the same spot as before? I'm not sure, but again we can see more of this sort of jagged, low geometry junk, which again does not look good whatsoever. It's kind of hard to sort of notice these things with the lighting and so on, and that's something which we'll need to address, because I can pretty much guess that the lighting inside our structures is going to be really dark. Yeah, it is. It's a little bit spooky and foggy and whatnot. There are a couple of things we could do with this. We could manually edit the lighting in Sapien. That would take a lot of time though, and it's really only a useful technique for getting rid of, little anomalies and lighting bugs and glitches and stuff like that. What would probably be the best route would be to either add some visual interest, so some light strips or decals which emit light themselves, so that will light up the walls here, or we could edit the sky tag properties to incorporate more light inside of the BSP as opposed to outside, or in tandem with the outside if you prefer the lighting that way. Personally, I prefer, structures inside to be a little bit more dark and gloomy than the outside, but it's up to you. Here's another classic example of optimization gone a little bit awry. We've got this sort of pyramidish point here. Again, I could relax that point in 3ds Max, or I could add more detail. For example, I could incorporate a mesh smooth modifier, and that would average down the vertices whilst adding a little bit of geometry. I don't want you guys to get used to the idea that, oh, if I've got something which looks really horrible and junky like this here, I can just add a mesh smooth modifier to it, because the mesh smooth modifier is not a solution to everything. For example, here we have, well, I don't know how to describe it, but a lot of crap going on here. We've got this really long triangle. Simple remedy, I could target weld to that vert, to this vert, or I could just bring this vertex up to around there, and that would shallow out this sort of steep incline which we needlessly have there. Again, we have sort of a little bit of a weird ish pit going on there, which I'll need to remove. These humps themselves, they add a little bit of a tactical element to the game, because if you try and visualize yourself in sort of a multiplayer match where you've got guys shooting at you from the other side of the map in a tank or I don't know, a rocket launcher, and you could quickly dive behind cover behind one of these humps, it's pretty useful. And it also prevents campers, which is a good thing. Okay. Anyway, that's going to be it for this testing portion of the tutorial. I think just go over all the stuff I've said. Definitely go ahead and test out your BSP. Note down all of the bad points So for us, that would be that little anomaly which we had in the skybox somewhere over there, I think it was. And we also need to add more geometry to these really low chunky portions, and lighting we need to look at, and that's pretty much it. Also textures and UVs, but those we already know need creating rather than fixing. So with that said, we're going to cover all of those things in part 19. In part 18 I'm going to go over, as I already mentioned, sort of scenarios which occur when your structure didn't compile successfully. So I'll show you how to fix those sort of errors, the most common errors anyway. But apart from that, thank you for watching, and I will see you in another tutorial perhaps.